Shabbat Shalom. Praise Yahweh for the beautiful Sabbath day. And at this time, brothers and sisters, we'll turn the services over to the great deacon, David Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, saints of Yahweh. What a beautiful, beautiful sight. Please be seated. I got to tell you, it's a great honor and privilege to come before the saints of Yahweh today in His wonderful house. And I'm going to try to keep this as on pace and as slow as I can. I know there's a lot of new people in Yahweh's house and a lot of new people tuning in every day out there. And so it's important that we review a few things. So to start this out, the title of my sermon is Enjoy Having a Job in the Work, Part 3. In the August newsletter, which I hope we've all gotten by now, you can see where it says, "Come, learn the way to peace, joy, love, and health." Well, there's a way that we're going to do that, and we've got to be taught. And so does everybody coming into this house. But who will they learn from when they come? Well, we've got to be here and be ready to teach. You know, Yahweh called us to His house to be teachers. And in the 10th book of Israel, I'm going to read this to you. Awesome book. Believe into the one sent. Remember that. Believe into the one sent, okay? Pastor says, of course, we're building teachers. That's our motto that Yahweh has given us. We build teachers. But they're the teachers of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. They're not the teachers of the schools of higher learning. The one that one of the apostles described as rudiments of the world. Of course, that was a King James word, but Pastor says he was thinking over the schools of higher learning and what they're teaching. And they were having this meeting, I think it might have been the G8 or something like that. They were having this meeting to decide what to do. And some people actually thought they're going to establish a new world order. Some think it has to do with money. And Pastor said, well, I wonder what'd make them think of that. And he started laughing, it has to do with money. Well, that's what it's all about, money, money, money. It's what controls the world, and they want all the money coming their way. Well, what you've got to do, and this is what you've got to do, is come out of this way of thinking and humble yourself as a slave. Come out of this way of thinking and humble yourself as a slave. Be willing to do whatever Yahweh assigns you to do with all your might, and when He says Yahweh, He means the priests that He's chosen by lot to guide you and show you in the work and being part of that work. And that's what you're for here today, or here for today. That's what He's been training us for. Pastor's been training us for 40 years now in the wilderness of God worshipers. And then on down on the page it says, Yeshua showed that He could take these men and make instruments for Yahweh to use out of these children who had been brought up in Galilee, talked about like okies, looked down on like okies, in fact, by the Pharisees and their schools of higher learning. Okay? So, the elite, these schools of higher learning, this group of people that have all the money, we are scum in their eyes. We're scum in their eyes. We're hated. We are slaves. We are the working class. And Yahweh knew that. He knew exactly how everything was going to go down. And their system is not designed to bring us wealth and help us succeed in any way. We're looked down on very much. This Nimrod system that the roaming Romans covered the earth with. They hold the carrot out there and they get you to go a little further thinking you're going to achieve something and you keep going for that carrot and you never quite catch it. That's how it is in this world. And we can't be overcome by that. I'd like to turn to 1 Corinthians 1:26. It's on page 887. 1 Corinthians 1:26. And also through 28. So page 887, 1 Corinthians 1:26, 28. Not many worldly, wise, and influential, nor noble are called by Yahweh. It says, for you see your calling, brothers, how that not many wise men according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But Yahweh has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And Yahweh has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. And the base things of the world and things which are despised has Yahweh chosen, yes, and the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things which are. So He's chosen us. He's chosen us, these base people of the world, the ones that the world hates. And, they see that there's nothing in us that's desirable. You go out there to work. For those of you who are still working out in the world, you go and meet with people, and it's like they have a frown on their face from the very beginning. There's nothing desirable in us that they see. We're not going to be their golf buddies. We're not going to go watch football with them. We're not going to do all those things that they do out there in the business world. And it's just like Yahshua. Yahweh said that Yahshua, there would be nothing desirable to man in him. When you look at him, there's nothing that anyone would desire. And just like pastor, an okie, right? An okie. It's what they make fun of. That's what we are to them, the unlearned and the ignorant, the okies of the world. And they hate us without a cause. Turn to page 833, please. Page 833. It's Yachanan 15, verse 18. It's page 833. It says, if the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. And if you were of this world, the world would have loved its own, because you're not part of the world, for I have chosen you out of the world, and for this reason the world hates you. But these okies that Yahweh called, Yahweh has called us to solve the problems of the world. In the homes, in the nations, in the entire universe, in fact. And we're qualifying for those jobs now. Now, I know in this qualifying, we've got to remember to endure too. But we don't qualify by how much money we have like this world. In their system, you qualify for the top offices, and the power and influence you have depends upon how much money you have. Money in your pocket. If you don't have money in your pocket, are you depressed? If you're scrounging for every penny, are you depressed? Do you come out of that depression when you get some money in your wallet? If you do, we've got to come out of that. We have to stop trusting in money and in this world, and we have to start trusting in Yahweh with all of our heart. But this is how we're qualifying. We're qualifying by how obedient and how humble that we can be. In fact, this tree of life, it was guarded from those that were spoken about in Corinthians, those noble and wise and all. It was guarded from them. You have to be called. Not many were called. You have to be called by Yahweh to come to this tree of life. What are we called to do? Well, we're called to do a work, aren't we? We're called to do a work. And what is that work that we are to do? Well, remember Yachanan? 6:29, believe into the one sent. That's our work, that we believe into the one sent. And if we believe into the one sent, then we're going to know that all the problems in this world are going to be solved. And we're going to be doing that through the one sent. All the problems. In fact, in the New Prophetic Word magazine, Yahweh sets before us life and death. And on page 2, it says the whole world, which includes the USA, is literally filled with violence. Murders by the millions or by the few stirs no conscience. Mass murders of adults, men and women and children are only remembered until the next ball game. There's no remembrance at all. There's no repentance at all. And on page 3, it shows many of the curses which are out there and coming upon mankind at this time. The story of Angelina Jolie and the surgery that she went through, the sexually transmitted diseases, Michael Douglas, all these things that are out there today and are coming forth. The birth defect statistics. There's so many birth defects out there, and Pastor told us, no one's born these days without some type of defect. Yahweh's going to help us with that, but everybody has a defect of some type these days. and it's worse in those of the world. And we are going to teach this world. We are going to teach this world this program, this Peaceful Solution Character Education program. We are going to be teaching this program, and it's a very simple program. All we have to do is assess what the situation is, admit there's a problem, and then solve it using the Peaceful Solution Character Education program. So we've got to have joy, our joy in the work. We've got to have joy in knowing that we're going to be fixing these things here in Yahweh's house, through Yisrayl, through pastor, through the branch. We're going to be fixing these things, okay? And the jobs that we're doing right now in the kingdom, I know it's hard to find joy in those sometimes, but the jobs that we have right now, these aren't the jobs that we're going to have in the kingdom. These are the jobs that help us qualify. I mean, if you're fixing cars, if you're washing dishes, if you're cleaning toilets, those things are going to be done by other people. We're going to have people helping us do these things. It's the effort, though, that we put into these things that we're being judged by. This qualifying, these things like humility, temperance, perseverance, determination. Oh, wait a minute. I've heard those things somewhere before, haven't you? Oh, in fact, turn to page 961, please. I want to bring some people up to date in case there's any new people that are listening to this. On page 961, Kepha tells us that the love of peace be multiplied to you through the full knowledge of Yahweh and Yeshua our King. Remember that full knowledge. And if you go on down, it says, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, to knowledge temperance, to temperance perseverance, and perseverance holiness, and holiness brotherly kindness and love. If these things are in you and abound, they cause you to be neither barren nor unfruitful. Please remember that. They cause you to be neither barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our King Yeshua Messiah. But he who lacks these things is blind and cannot see afar off, and has forgotten that he was purged from his old sins. And that's not qualifying. He's not getting these things. He's lacking these things. But we all must qualify. It says, therefore, my brothers, be all the more diligent to make your calling and election sure. For if you do these things, you will never fall. And in this way, an entrance into the everlasting kingdom of our King and Savior, Yeshua Messiah, will be abundantly supplied to you. Now, in that anywhere, I didn't read that, add to your faith washing dishes, add to your faith fixing cars, add to your faith selling cars. I didn't see that. I saw the qualifying things that we needed to learn how to treat other people. We needed to learn the Peaceful Solution Character Education program. And we have to remember the endurance. It's kind of rough, but if we were rich and had a limo come and pick us up and take us to service, what endurance is there in that? What endurance would there be in having your own personal priest come to your mansion and preach to you and tickle your ears? What endurance would that be? There's no endurance there. The endurance comes from doing the work, the hard, everyday work, and being put through those tests and trials. In fact, 1 Kepha, let's go to 1 Kepha real quick. I'm going to try to kick it in gear here. Let's go to 1 Kepha on page 960. 1 Kepha 4, verse 12 on page 960. It says, beloved, do not be amazed concerning the fiery trial which you must undergo in order to be tested, as though some alien thing were befalling you. And we'll probably come back to this, but rejoice in the fact that you are partakers of the Messiah's sufferings. Now get this, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. So you can be glad with exceeding joy. And I guarantee you, you're going to be very, very glad with the things that are coming forth, and Yahweh willing, with what we're going to be talking about here in just a minute. I want you to understand, though, that endurance means just that. It means to stay there, stick with it, through everything. Yes, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make some bad choices. But please remember, to everybody out there, anybody out there that feels like giving up in any way, shape, or form, that the only situation, the only mistake at this time that cannot be overcome is your leaving this house, this work. That's the only thing that cannot be overcome at this time. So if you've got something that you think, some fiery trial and test that you think has gotten you to the point where you've been judged unfit and unworthy, well, think again. You're not even supposed to be judging yourself to that degree. It's not your job. Your job is to endure. Your job is to do this work. Your job is to overcome. And yeah, you got to overcome these thoughts, these things. In fact, the peaceful solution teaches us to overcome these things. I want you to remember that the lowest job in the kingdom is way better than anything Solomon could have ever imagined. So please remember that even if you don't qualify for some job, guess what? Israel Hawkins is the only one that's qualified for his job. None of us are going to be doing that job. He is. Okay, so don't be flat. Just understand that you've got a job to do and that Yahweh's finding out what you're capable of doing and how much effort you're putting into it. And He's going to give you the success that comes. And I say this to my own admonition too. We all need reminders. And I remember those reminders that Pastor has us putting all over the place. And I think some of mine got moved. But I walked into the bathroom one day and I looked up on the mirror and I thought, where have those things been? I was looking at them and endure and love the work above all else and all these things. There's about 6 or 7 things up there. And I thought, why haven't I seen those things about the last week? And I remembered, and I looked at it and it reminded me. And then I picked up the phone and called. And that's what you need to do. You need to pick up the phone, you need to call and get the guidance you need so that you can understand that your job is to endure, okay? And I'll tell you, this enduring and the peaceful solution and being humble, I'd just like to read something out of the acceptance book real quick. This is so very important, the acceptance manual. It says, a humble, thankful attitude leaves no cause for conflict. Without a humble attitude, being instructed on what you should and should not do can seem very frustrating. Many have a difficult time maintaining positive relationships with those in authority. Are all you children listening? Are all you adults listening? Because they have an opposing view of what's fair. If we have some type of opposing view. But here's the bottom line. Even though we may not like the decision of our parents or other authority figures, we must obey. We must be respectful and obey no matter what we think about it. That's part of the endurance. But if we let depression cloud everything, even the smallest problems can seem absolutely overwhelming. And when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, everything's not going to go our way the way we think it should go. You have a choice in the way to handle them. You can be overwhelmed and give up, which leads to a negative attitude, depression, and feelings of helplessness, to where the whole world is on your shoulders and you just don't know what to do. Well, Yahweh's already told us what to do. And that's part of going for the gold, is getting that positive thought process instead of the negative. Or you can accept that the problem exists, look at it in perspective, and be realistic about the problem and pick up the phone and call and get some guidance. Don't allow life's challenges to get you down or cause you to lose hope. Instead, let them motivate you to succeed in reaching your full moral potential. Now, that's the Peaceful Solution Character Education program for you. It's very awesome, and I surely do suggest that everybody get that book and read it, that acceptance book. It's really awesome. Okay, now, let's shift gears just a little bit here. Let's turn to Yachanan 15, please. Yachanan 15, and that is on page 832. Yachanan 15 on page 832, and look at verse 1 through 5. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me, now be thinking of these words, what you know of these words already. Every branch in me that does not produce fruit, He takes away. And every branch that produces fruit, He purges it, cleanses it from filth, purifies it, that it may bring forth more fruit. You're already clean through the word, the law, and the prophets. Now look at verse 4. Abide in me, and I in you, just as the branch cannot produce fruit by itself, just like pastor doesn't produce fruit, which we're his fruit, we are the fruit of pastor. But he doesn't produce this fruit without Yeshua, without Yahweh. So abide in me and I in you, just as the branch cannot produce fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine. Yeshua is the vine, remember that? So unless the branch abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. Now, who do you think we're supposed to be abiding in? Israel Hawkins. We have to abide in pastor. We have to believe into the one sent. We can't bear fruit on our own. We can't go out there on our own will and bear fruit. We can only bear fruit if we're sent by the one sent. Let me read what abide is here. In the American Heritage Dictionary, abide is to remain in place, to wait patiently for, and continue, to be sure or firm. Now, isn't that right along with endurance, what we've been talking about? And in Strong's, it's word 3306, and I'm probably tearing this word up. The great Kahan Yehuda will let me know. I think it's pronounced meno. And it's a verb, primary verb. It says to stay in a given place, in relation, a state or relation, an expectancy, to continue, to dwell. The word endure is in there. To be present, to remain, to stand, to tarry long. And very simply, this whole thing means to believe into the one sent. Believe into the branch that the golden oil pours through that we need. So once again, in verse 4, abide in me and I in you, just as the branch cannot produce fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. Okay, I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him produces much fruit, but without me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he's thrown away and into the fire. So without pastor, we can do nothing. Once again, we can't go out on our own. In verse 7, it says, if you abide in me, letting my words and teaching pertaining to the law and prophets abide in you, you will ask what you will, and it will be done for you. We've got to come into unity with the one sin. I think we have time to go to Ephesians 4:13 on page 918. And it says, until we all, and please remember that word all, until we all come to the same unity of the faith and of the same knowledge of the Son of Yahweh has unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of fullness, the perfection of Messiah. And so remember that word all. All of us have to come to the full knowledge of the Son of Yahweh and to the perfect man and to be perfect, to come to perfection. Romans 8:18 says, we don't have to go there right now, but Romans 8:18 talks about the revealing of the sons of Yahweh. In fact, let me go ahead and read it. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which will be revealed in us. So the sufferings, remember the endurance. For the earnest expectation of the creation waits for the revealing of the sons of Yahweh. All the sons of Yahweh. That's what all creation is waiting upon. And you know, the prophets and the apostles, you know, they're not made perfect without us, are they? Remember? We've learned that before. They're not made perfect without us. And why is that? Well, now, imagine this, okay? Because this is going to take place, and it's going to take place from right here in Abelin. Everything, all the work that's going on is going to be sent out from here. Everything from this time on is sent out from right here. But imagine this. If you had to decide, well, do I want to go out on that trip with the missionaries out there, or do I want to sit right here and teach this class here? Because what you need to imagine is this. Remember, all need to come to perfection. And that the prophets before us won't come to perfection without us. So you know what you're going to be doing? You're going to be teaching them. You're going to be sitting here in the workshops. I think everyone's had an opportunity to teach a workshop class from time to time. You're going to be sitting here in a workshop, and here's Daniel and Noah and King David sitting right in front of you. And you're going to be all wide-eyed teaching them the peaceful solution. And they're going to be sitting there, and, Shaul's going to be, the Apostle Shaul will be there, and he said, hey, Timothy, remember that time? Or, they're asked to give scenarios and everything of a time when they had a problem and when everything worked out right. Well, you're going to be hearing all these awesome things that took place in their life, and it's going to be like a history book unfolding before your eyes. History that you haven't even heard about yet. The things which are not even, the books would be, this big, stacked all over the place for miles and miles to hear everything that went on. And you're going to be hearing these things. And they're going to be wide-eyed looking at you because you're teaching them the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, bringing them to perfection, just like it says in 2 Kepha. They need this too. Now, I'm going to tell you something. If that doesn't make you enjoy having a job in the work, looking forward to that, looking forward to what's coming up, without us, they will not be made perfect. Salvation wasn't offered then. They didn't have salvation then. It says salvation was taken away back in Genesis. Remember? Do you remember that? So all that have gone to sleep before us are waiting on us, so that we can resurrect them and we can get them in here to the workshop classes and teach them and show them the history about the 1 cent. And of course, they're not going to have any problem with that because they wrote about the 1 cent. They wrote about the branch that pours out the golden oil that we're receiving daily and that we're going to share with them. Every day, they're going to be learning about this and they won't have a problem at all. Look, turn to Daniel 12 just real quick if you would. Daniel 12. And I just want to show you, Daniel actually, if you remember, Daniel got sick. He got sick because of the things he was seeing, and he didn't know what it meant. He wanted to be partakers of it, but he just didn't know. In Daniel 12, verse 4, it says, "But you, O Daniel, shut up the words of this book until the time of the end." Well, this is the time of the end. Salvation is offered now. Now is when salvation is offered, but we had to come to a certain point. Yahweh set this plan long in advance and was going to produce this and bring this forth in the last days through that branch pouring out the golden oil, and then we, His fruit, will be here to continue bringing on more fruit. But not on our own. No, not on our own. We have to be sent out by the 1 cent to bring forth this fruit. In verse 9 in Daniel 12, he says, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end." And Daniel, he was so messed up about it. He just begged to know what these things meant. And you know what? So did all the rest of the prophets. All the prophets and apostles that had lived before us. They wanted to know. They wanted to know. They knew it was a beautiful plan that was being set forth. But they didn't have the entire picture. They wrote about it, but they didn't quite understand it. And what we have to remember is in Zechariah, read Zechariah 4. Remember Revelations 11:3 talking about the olive trees and the lamps on the 7 lamp lampstands. Zechariah 4. Read about this. Isaiah 44, remember the names of the 2 witnesses, and it states, "You are my witnesses." And what we have to do now is we have to continue in this work, no matter how hard it seems. Continue in the work. Enjoy having a job in the work because you look forward to the joy that's coming. And remember that. Think about it. Think about how you'll be teaching class to Samuel, to the great prophet Samuel, to Isaiah, to King David, to his friend Yochanan. They got some stories to tell us, I'm sure. So they'll be sitting there learning the peaceful solution, and we'll be teaching them. And what a great and wonderful day that will be. The great and wonderful day of Yahweh. And with that, may Yahweh bless your understanding, and I'd like to turn this over to the great Kahan, Sophania Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Please be seated. We have some great prophecies, of course, being fulfilled, as always, every week actually now. But keep in mind that the perspective that these things now are going on while they're in this last 9 months that they're going to sign this peace treaty, where they're going to say finally that they have this permanent peace. And we start off with, we have several stories on the Russia-U.S. Relationship that's souring, and they have different words for it. It's chilling, the tensions are rising. And remember back a few months ago, they caught Barack Obama with Medvedev, and he said that after I get elected, we'll be able to talk. Well, and now they're saying, well, he's been elected, and it's not working out that way. But central to this division, if you notice in one of the stories, of all things, of all the things that could possibly be one of the reasons that Barack Obama doesn't meet with Putin is because of this anti-gay propaganda law that Russia just passed. And see, this all fits with what Pastor has been teaching us, that this sodomy religion and the promotion of it is what's going to lead to global thermonuclear war, which is going to result in 4/5 of the Earth's population being killed. And then we've got a story, too, about NSA spying and how they're going to make sure that that you still have your privacy. And then we have the U.S. Terror strikes in Yemen using drones. So let's play the news.
Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, Jeff, even though temperatures are heating up around the globe, there's a feeling of coldness in the atmosphere between two superpowers. We also are going to talk a little bit today about some of the closing of the embassies, United States embassies around the world. Well, the United States and Russia are those two superpowers that are at odds with each other. In fact, President Obama recently canceled plans for a one-on-one meeting with President Putin next month, citing a lack of progress on critical issues.
One main issue was Russia deciding to give temporary asylum to NSA leaker Edward Snowden. Now, this also puts a stumbling block in the path of President Obama's goal of rebooting U.S.-Russia relations.
President Obama's canceling of the summit with Russia came about after consulting the State Department and the Department of Defense. He asked if anything could be achieved with President Putin concerning arms control, missile defense, Syria, or human rights, and across the board, the answer came back to him, no.
As one top presidential advisor stated, nothing added up, and we weren't going out to have a summit just for the sake of appearances. President Obama, who recently appeared on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, said concerning Russia, there have been times where they slip back into Cold War thinking and a Cold War mentality. And what I consistently say to President Putin is, that's the past, and we've got to think about the future.
He concluded, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to cooperate more effectively than we do. Since Putin has returned to power, the cooperation on nuclear arms reduction has ceased, and hostilities on a U.S. missile defense system in Europe have been reignited. Now, this has reversed the progress made by the then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton when in 2009 she literally hit a reset button with Russia. At that particular time, Putin was out of office.
White House officials said the reset died the day Putin regained power and was back in office. Now, recent disagreements grew with Russian President Putin granting temporary asylum to Edward Snowden, even after President Obama lobbied him to send him back to the U.S. to face felony charges.
President Obama stated in regards to Snowden on The Tonight Show that we don't have an extradition treaty with Russia. We try to work with them if there's a lawbreaker in their country, but they didn't do that with us. And in some ways, that's reflective of some of the underlying challenges that we've had with Russia lately.
The State Department did inform Russia before President Obama announced that the summit had been canceled. Mr. Obama will attend a global economic summit next month in St. Petersburg, Russia. Now, so far, there are no plans for an Obama-Putin meeting at that time either.
That's right. Now, as a further indication of international instability and turmoil, more than several U.S. embassies and consulates were forced to close this week for security reasons. Now, YPN's Larry McGee has our report. Larry, how how many embassies, should I say, has the United States actually compelled to close?
19 is the count so far, guys. And at this point, America is on serious alert as officials still fear that an attack on some Western target could happen. And both the Yemeni and American governments have heightened pressure on Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. In the Yemeni capital of Sana'a, the army is stopping vehicles and frisking passengers, searching for suicide bombers as a part of increased security measures, which they say has prevented attacks inside the country intended to hurt oil and gas operations. Officials say Al-Qaeda terrorists had planned to strike strategic coastal energy terminals with the thought of taking hostages and murdering foreign workers. In January, dozens of personnel were slain when extremists struck a gas plant in Algeria, and analysts are theorizing that might have influenced the recent plot. Yemeni officials are reporting to have foiled those efforts, but there have been no arrests, and American intelligence sources are cautioning that the largest threat is still not over. The story is that information taken from intercepted communications hinted that the strikes may reach well beyond Yemen. So this week, the U.S. went again after AQAP fighters. For the fifth time in 2 weeks, U.S. drones fired on militants. 7 suspects were killed by missile fire, but no leaders are reported to have been hit. Authorities say the current scare has no expiration date. And in addition, Yemeni officials have provided a green light for the U.S. to step up its drone operations to address the Al-Qaeda threat to hurt the oil and the Western way of life. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
We appreciate your report, Larry. Now, at a news conference this week, President Obama clearly upheld the NSA surveillance programs, which Edward Snowden recently exposed. However, he did promise some reforms would be made. He said, given the history of abuse by governments, it's right to ask questions about surveillance, particularly as technology is reshaping every aspect of our lives.
The president continued, it's not enough for me as president to have confidence in these programs. The American people need to have confidence in them as well. He proposed several changes to meet that goal. First, he pledged more openness about surveillance operations, like those of collecting phone records and watching internet traffic.
He also wants to work in partnership with Congress to reform part of the Patriot Act, which governs the collection of metadata. And third, the president is asking for a privacy advocate to weigh in on the FISA court approval of surveillance requests. Now, lastly, he is calling for a panel of high-level experts to review all government programs.
The president expressed how the nation's vast surveillance network is vital to national security and should be kept secret. But now that classified details have been leaked out about government, internet, and phone snooping, Mr. President is pulling back the curtain on some long protected spy secrets, in essence, beating any would-be leakers to the punch.
He explained, rather than have a trunk come out here and a leg come out here and a tail over here, let's just pull the whole elephant out there so people know exactly what they're looking at. Let's examine what's working and what's not, he said. Are there additional protections that can be put in place? And let's move forward.
Questioning Mr. Snowden's motives and his methods, the president stated, I don't think Mr. Snowden was a patriot. There were other avenues available for somebody whose conscience was stirred up and thought they needed to question government actions.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, Snowden's asylum in Russia further strained the relations between Russia and the United States. Even though Mr. Obama canceled the planned summit with Mr. Putin, he said this in a recent press conference. I don't have a bad personal relationship with Putin. When we have conversations, they're candid, they're blunt, and oftentimes they're constructive.
He continued, I know how the press likes to focus on body language, but the truth is oftentimes when we have conversations, they're productive. Recently, Mr. Putin signed into legislation criminalizing public displays of homosexuality in Russia. Now, Mr. Obama condemned that law, but said he opposes a U.S. boycott of the upcoming Winter Olympics next February in Russia.
The president said that he hoped the American gay athletes would make a point that the athletically inclined Putin would not soon forget by winning gold, silver, or bronze. Now, also to note, one of the reasons that the president is an opposing voice on the FISA court is because the court often renders one-sided judgments. For example, of the over 1,200 cases brought before the courts seeking surveillance and records, 100% of them were approved.
Oh, amazing. Now, it's called, or being called, the snub heard round the world. Yes, we're speaking about the September summit meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, which President Obama recently canceled. He made the decision shortly after Russia gave NSA leaker Edward Snowden asylum.
In June, at the last meeting of the two presidents, their body language spoke louder than their words, showing disagreement and division. Now, not only are Obama and Putin reaching a new low, but relations between the United States and Russia are also. The U.S. president's cancellation of the publicly announced meeting in Russia marks the first ever since the end of the Cold War.
Besides Putin's decision to grant asylum to Edward Snowden, he's also defied the U.S. by selling weapons to the Syrian government, which is accused of slaughtering its own people. The president vented about it last night, with Jay Leno stating there have been times when they slipped back into Cold War thinking and have had a Cold War mentality. And what I say to President Putin is that that's the past. But President Obama's actions are speaking volumes about the two countries' relations.
The president alluded to an even bigger international crisis he is confronting this week in a speech at Camp Pendleton, California, a terror threat that has forced the close of embassies throughout the Middle East, as we just heard from Larry. Now, because of the threat of the United States also has issued a worldwide travel alert to all its citizens. He spoke to the soldiers saying, "As for the extremists, here's what those who would cowardly attack our civilians don't get. The United States is never going to retreat from the world. We don't get terrorized."
The embassies will remain closed until at least the end of the week, with the president's national security team staying on high alert. As one senior official said, the threat is not over.
Well, with wars right around the corner and prophecies being fulfilled daily, Yisrayl Hawkins has stated the need to train teachers in the peaceful solution has never been needed more. Now, if you're interested in learning how you can become a teacher of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program and want to learn what you can do to stop all wars, then visit them at their website. You can go to www.peacefulsolution.org, or you can go to www.stopallwars.org.
If you haven't already done so, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. You can write the House of Yahweh at P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can also call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can also visit them on the web at www.yahweh.com or www.yisraelhawkins.com. You can email them at info@yahweh.com. And of course, all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen.
Don't go anywhere. Up next is Yisrayl Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.
Everyone please stand. The greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Let me get y'all seated. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. We had men jumping 3 foot off of the floor over here just now. Talk about excitement. I'm really excited right now about our teachers, and of course I want everyone in the house to be a teacher, and it looks like it's coming this way. That's what you're here for, to be teachers, bring forth fruit. But as the great Deacon David Knighton just brought out, you got to stay connected to the branch. If you don't, your fruit will shrivel and die. That's right. And we got to all stay connected with the vine, and we got to draw our water from the rock. Now, if you can remember those things. Sounds like a song, don't it? Don't that sound like a song? Sounds great to me, anyway. We're getting some help from the news media. Somehow or another, the letters and the articles that we're writing, they're reaching the news media, and they're finding interest in these letters. The one where I talked to Pope Francis, blasting him for his recent gay comments. You know, I do not condemn gays, and I wouldn't poke fun at them. I wouldn't humiliate them. That's not our job. The system is what caused these people to be what they are. They're just it's the same thing with murders, with school shootings. The system that's come forth from the religions that came against Abel. Yes, it started then. The system that came against Abel, and then went from that to what we see with the Nimrod system of building weapons of war and trying to overcome and force the other people into compliance. Well, that same system has brought forth this evil of school shootings, of sodomy. Sodomy is an evil thing. We should be trying to help these people to overcome, and there is a way to overcome it. You can do it with psychologists know this. They offer treatments for it, and a person doesn't have to commit these evil acts. They are acts of evil. They're sinful acts. This is admitted by the Catholic Church. They are sinful acts, but you don't have to do those things. You don't have to shoot people at schools. You don't have to fight wars. Fighting wars is as evil as sodomy. Yes. The acts of fighting wars is as evil. It's sin. There is no eternal life in it. Well, of course, the Pope was very careful, but I wrote him a letter, and he got the letter. I know he did. Praise Yahweh. I wrote another letter to Al-Qaeda, and this was an open letter to Al-Qaeda showing them how they and any other group of people that think they're being forced into war, well, we've offered them an alternative of peace, and for some way or another, this letter, which wasn't even out, but about 3 days until over 24,000 news media had it and running it. Please read these news articles. There's a lot of information in here that Yahweh is giving the nations right now, and of course, from this work that He has set forth in these last days is going to come a huge multitude of people that is going to repent. They're going to repent of sodomy. They're going to repent of shootings, of killings, of murder, fornication, adultery, bestiality. They're going to repent of all these things. You've got to remember that health, they stopped teaching health. They started teaching drugs. And Yahweh's health laws were there for everyone for a while. But of course, after Yeshua, then the Catholic Church fought against these laws, took them away from the people. They couldn't own them. They couldn't have a Bible. They couldn't own inspired scriptures. And this went on for over 2,000 years. And finally, of course, all this changed due to sickness that they brought on themselves. But now we have the Bible. But for 2,000 years, they didn't even have these health laws. So they weren't taught. They didn't have the laws that showed that sodomy brings forth diseases. They didn't have the laws that said eating pork brings forth diseases. And they're one and the same. Killing. Killing, too, brought forth a disease that almost wiped the Catholic Church out, called the Black Plague. They killed so many people in the Crusades and they didn't bury them. They just let the buzzards eat them and whatever else. And, of course, the Black Plague got started and they blamed the rats. I blamed the rats, too, the two-legged rats that live in Rome, at the Vatican at this time. That's the ones right there that are now guilty. Of course, all the people that follow the Catholic Church is guilty too. Christianity is just following the footprints of the popes. The only authority they have for doing what they're doing comes from the Catholic Church. And of course, the others that are waging war, they think they're being forced into it. But I could show them a way to have Yahweh's protection, and I do in this letter, to have Yahweh's protection. And of course, Yahweh would fight their battles for them. He would not send people out with swords. He shows that very plainly in these last days, that he will give any nation or any people protection if they want to turn from this war raging that is going on among the nations, unhealthy eating habits and unhealthy sexual habits. Anyone who wants to turn from that can, and they will, in these last days, have Yahweh's protection, and now salvation has come, Yahweh says, as the deacon also brought out. Israel Hawkins, this is the headlines of this letter, and this is a long letter, but they ran the whole thing. Israel Hawkins writes letter to Al-Qaeda offering a peaceful solution to end the wars. There is nothing sure in war except death and destruction. This prophecy is sure. It's the only sure way of peace and protection. The pastor and overseer of the House of Yahweh said. Israel Hawkins has penned an open letter to Al-Qaeda explaining how, and then you can see the full article down and gives the website. There was one here in Abelin. Oh, there's the number. Since that letter was written, I just turned it in this week. 24,727 news media has grabbed that and printed it or broadcast it. They even showed my picture. Look at that. That's the reason all the television sets went down in the country, broke all their cameras. Israel Hawkins writes letter to Al-Qaeda offering peaceful solution. The letter, there's another one there. Now this one came from Abelin. We haven't, we're looking it up now, but I shut off news from Abelin, not completely, but I said I wouldn't give them any voluntarily anymore because they rejected Yahweh. And of course they're suffering, you know, these people are suffering sickness, disease, and death. Their children are being born with cancers. The people that are adults have cancers, many of them, and don't even know it. Cancers of the brain, the lungs, the heart, and they're finding it out daily, and of course trying to get treatment for it in the hospitals. The hospitals offer nothing that I can see that is helpful. They offer to take all their money that they have saved during their lifetime. There's an old joke. It's not really a joke, it's more reality, I think, but it says, I worked like hell. I lived in town where I worked like hell to live on the farm, where I worked like hell to move back to the city. and it's like the Satan running to and fro. They're hunting something, they just don't know what they're hunting. And of course they work their whole life away. They put money in the bank to give to the hospitals when they die, or to the nursing homes. I don't know if you saw this about the nursing homes yesterday, but it's a horrible thing. It was on the news. Maybe we can play it next week. But the man picks up a crippled, I think it was a woman, and throws her to a bed. She died shortly after that, but they got him on film. And some of the other horrible things that is going on in those places. Not to say that all people are this evil. This is another blame the system, because the system has brought this about. Their minds are sick. They're like the person that goes to the movie and starts shooting everyone in the movies. Their mind snaps. And where they can't think clearly and they want to kill. This is a big man that picked this body up out of a wheelchair and slung it into a bed, which she died a few hours later, a few days later. But, this is a sickness that Abelin has. And, of course, the churches that are following this system, that stop teaching the laws, and this is the reason for it, they stop teaching the laws. They don't know the difference. They don't know what to do. They don't know to stop eating pork. They don't know that illegal sexual activities cause all kinds of cancers in the throat, the brain, every part of your body. They're causing our earth to break down, our atmosphere to break down. Our water is defiled, and now they're going to start pouring their urine in it. And of course the Scripture prophesied that. They said they'd be drinking. They'd actually prophesied for this time period, this generation. And Yeshua said you're going to see it. But they don't even know the prophecies. They don't even know that the prophecy that the prophet Yahweh wrote, from your activities now, you're going to be drinking your own urine. And of course, that's what they're doing. and they're saying, the man that was arguing this point, he said, don't you see that all this stuff, when it overflows, it's going into the creeks? When it rains, where do you think that water goes to? It goes to your drinking water in your lakes. Well, now they're going to say, well, we're going to refine it now. We're going to... But every time one of them picks up a glass of water, they get about that close to their mouth. That's as far as they get. So they know that this stuff is still unclean. But they're going to convince the public to go ahead and drink it. Or go get some bottled water, which comes from the tap. Boy, that makes a lot of sense, don't it? I'm going to stock up on this bottled water. And well, where does that water come from? Oh, it comes from the tap here in Abelin. What a brilliant thought. That's like the Pope says, oh, there's no sin. There's no sin in sodomy. Sodomy is not a sin. Well, the action of sodomy is a sin. And they admitted that the action of sodomy is a sin. And why aren't they preaching against sin? Well, they're afraid to. And if you notice this too, I'll bring it next week if I have time. I don't have time today. But the Pope now has strengthened the laws of the Roman Empire. And he's got it now. He will have the 1st of September, where anyone who reports a rape of a child in the Vatican will serve 30 years or 35 years in the penitentiary. Right. You report anything. You report any of their activities, and you can go to jail for 35 years, to prison for 35 years. They know they're doing it, you know, but they're going to put a hush on anyone reporting it anymore. Well, of course, these letters that are going out are bringing forth the health laws, the peaceful solution, character education, how to stop war. This is a long letter that was put, this is, maybe I could put it here. Now, this is the letter that they chose to print, but there's one full page. That's page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and about 10 lines on page 6. So that's a long letter, but they chose that to go in the newspaper. So we are getting some great attention here. The world, they got this come from Press TV. Armageddon watch over Syria is the headlines. Now, this is somewhat similar to the letters that we're writing, and I'm thinking now maybe that I'll write a letter explaining Armageddon, which may then get the attention, because they don't know what Armageddon is, but they're thinking it's going to be a war between Russia and the United States, but those are going to come first and then Armageddon later. But experts on arms control policy confirmed by multiple independent sources indicate that Syria has been hit in recent days by at least 4 tactical nuclear weapons, at least 4 in the last few days. In addition, a Syrian army brigade suffered massive casualties from a Syrian gas attack. Not only are these attacks pushing the world to the brink of war, but they coincide with the threat against America from within. They go into some pretty great detail there. And of course, the Armageddon was just to catch attention. This is worthy of remark right here. The Al Jazeera date set for more Israeli-Palestinian talks. Now, the negotiations aimed at ending long-standing conflicts to begin on August 14th. That's just a few days. Halfway between that and my birthday. You might start thinking about this in your studies, everyone. In your studies, the life of Moshe, which always compares to this work now. Is everybody listening? The life of Moshe, which Yahweh compares and said, you'll no longer hear of Moshe and his coming out of Egypt with the 12 tribes, but you're going to start hearing here soon of this last gathering that comes from all nations, and it's going to completely overshadow, he says, Moshe and his work. It's going to be great. What is going forth to the nations right now is going to be really, really great. Moshe's life was split up into 3 40-year cycles. He was 40 years old when Yahweh brought him out of Egypt. Did you get that? He's actually in his 39th year. The time, if you'd understand, the Hebrew figures it a little bit different, and this is what throws people off sometimes when they're working on genealogies too. But you're like, if you're 40, classified as 40, you're in your 39th year going to 40. You passed, so they consider you 40 until you get to the next year, which you start going towards 41. But Moshe was actually 39 when he was sent out of Egypt, and he trained for 40 years, which made him 80 years old. Actually not 80, but is in his 79th year. In his 80th year, but 79, going on to his 80th year. I will be 79 the 28th of this month. Now, there was one more 40-year period after that training took place in Galilee with Yisrayl. Moshe trained for 40 years, you know, and then Yahweh sent him back. And when he was 80 or 79 years old, Yahweh sent him back to Egypt to get these 12 tribes, which he came out in that last 40 years, which brought him up to 120 years. Now, ours is going to be cut short. It's not going to be no 40 years. Ours is going to be cut short because of the bombs. And, of course, there's going to be a wide awakening when this takes place. About 4/5 of the Earth's population is going to be wiped out, and we're going to be dealing with the rest of them in a training period that's going to go on, which you will also have people who are given authority for salvation or eternal life, have been given authority for it. They don't have it yet, won't receive it except through you. That's the Son of Man, the plan of Yahweh in his last day's work that will be first. First to receive these powers from Yahweh, first to receive the powers that will actually turn the planets around, turn the whole creation around. All the things that Yahweh's fingers have framed, you are the ones, if you could get this in your mind, if you overcome, of course, if you submit, as the great deacon just got through showing, and others have shown before this, if you humble yourself, and then Yahweh will use you, and you will be given this great authority that he's spoken of in Genesis. The third chapter, first chapter, second chapter, where he says, I'm going to make mankind in my image. Well, of course, Yeshua was the firstborn of many brethren. Firstborn. He was the firstborn of many. But no one is going to make it without this remnant here that he's going to use to resurrect the dead. Yeshua's going to, the high priest, he's going to use this remnant, which are you right now. This is the great opportunity, brethren, that you have. This is such a wonderful prophecy here that, it's magnificent that he intends to give you. And that's what you're being trained for right now. Well, of course, we're going into this 80th year right now, as Moshe did, and I'm thinking that what we're seeing now is it. I don't think there'll be any more postponement after this. I'm thinking they give you 9 months here. This actually says it too. If my thumb is right there at it. 9 months. They're saying it's the next meeting is August 14th. You might start keeping in touch with that. It says Palestinian-Israeli negotiators will resume talks and ending their long-standing conflict on August the 14th in Jerusalem, the U.S. State Department has said. The sides held their first peace negotiations in nearly 3 years in Washington on July the 30th in U.S. mediated efforts to end the conflict of more than 6 decades. They agreed to try to resolve their differences within 9 months. And that's what caught so many people's attention. I had calls coming from everywhere saying, get the nuclear baby and read this page and get this article. Well, you might think of that. That's John Kerry and Israel and the Palestinian leader at this time negotiating to bring forth. So the time is right for this. And everything is set up for the wars to start. Remember, when they say they have achieved true peace, then the wars are going to start. The big one that we're talking about is not the small nuclear weapons. However, that is nuclear war, as the great Kohan Yedidia brought out several times, and still bringing it out in his letters. I want you to turn over to Daniel 12, and Daniel 12, there's a lot shown in this prophecy right here about the tribulation, what we're facing here, the great tribulation that Yahshua spoke of, and then Revelations is filled with it, and the ones that are bringing it forth. The Vatican is really making some moves now to tighten down, to resurrect the Roman Empire, and push forward this force. They want to bring force like they did before when the Roman Empire ruled the entire world, and the scriptures were all taken away from people at that time. They want to bring this back again, and they want complete force. And of course, they don't have the backing really that is true, because the people don't believe that this is ever going to be accomplished. Now, but Malachi Martin wrote about it, if you remember. I brought it out several times from the book, The Keys of This Blood. Speaking, of course, that book was written with the understanding that most of the world doesn't have today, and that's the 12 tribes right now is still ruling. and of course it's split up into different sections, but they are working together, the 12 tribes, and they're going to bring war against each other, just like they did in Israel. But they hope, each one is hoping to win out over the other one. The Pope especially hopes to come out on top. The United States hopes to. Russia, they're feared of. And this is what Malachi Martin brought out in this book, that Russia could turn at any time. Well, Russia has turned, and of course Russia has teamed up with China now, and they are planning global war. They're actually planning this. Okay, and here in Daniel, the 12th chapter, we see this great time of trouble in verse 1, and then we see a turning to righteousness in verse 3, and those who are wise, that is, those who have been taught by Yahweh, wise in the laws of Yahweh, and then there's a huge group here. It talks about the wise are going to turn many to righteousness here. You get that? Verse 3. Those who are wise, those who have been taught in the laws of Yahweh, will turn many to righteousness. So you know the righteousness is the keeping of Yahweh's laws, practicing Yahweh's laws. So that's the house of Yahweh turning people. The house of Yahweh is the wise ones, the light of the world, as Yahshua said, that is taking this message now to all nations, and the nations are beginning to respond. They're beginning to use the words that the house of Yahweh actually put out. But verse 4, chapter 12 and verse 4, Daniel was told to shut up the words and seal them. Well, of course, they were actually, as chapter 7 shows, they were taken away. If you look back to chapter 7, you'll see a great fight takes place here. Literally millions of people killed. It doesn't exaggerate it here like it does in the crusades that followed that actually fulfilled this prophecy. But it says he will speak great words against Yahweh. And that's exactly what he has come against. And of course, he's trying to wipe out the name. And he said, and if you remember this, in the catechisms of the Catholic Church, they let go of some information. And of course, someone put it in a book to sell, to make money. It wasn't known to the popes until the House of Yahweh brought it out what this book said, and talking about how they changed the names and so forth, to remove the name of Yahweh and Yeshua, and it's there in the catechisms of the Catholic Church. So the Pope found out about it, and they said somehow or another the name Yahweh has crept in over the years. So he said, use the name no more. I brought that out in sermons, and he gave another command saying, use the name no more. Well, of course, that's what they said back in Yeremia, but they've never been able to squash it completely. And of course, there was the rumors of Nora going around that used the name Yahweh. And these rumors kept alive certain things that when the truth came to light, then these people said, hey, this is it. Well, here now we see this great, he comes against the name of Yahweh, and he mentally attacks, both physically and mentally, in fact, attacks the saints of Yahweh, kills them off. We see some of this taking place in Daniel's life even, where, he was taken captive and they tried to retrain him in their literature. And of course, he was already trained. He knew the truth. So this stayed with Daniel. He wrote a book that actually Yahweh protected it, and now it's got down to us, telling us the prophecies that are taking place or going to take place. But here he says, and think to change the times, that's the feast days, and the laws, and they will be given unto his hand. And notice the word until there. Look at that word in that verse 25. He tells you how long it will be given into his hand. Till the time and times and the dividing of times. Now we got our Bible back about 100 years ago. It wasn't much longer than that. It came out in 1600. It was kept away from the entire world until it was finally given permission to print, to be printed, and several people were killed because of that, because it was finally reprinted. Now this was in 1600, and then it took quite a few years to get to the end of the earth after that, but it got to the end of the earth, where Yahweh had prophesied that a work would actually be born at that time. That was the beginning, the birth of a baby. Well, of course, he says, notice the exact time. He gives the exact time, and he gives you this time, and the divided time. Well, of course, if you know what that is, you'll know that Perez, Bill Clinton, and Yasser Arafat, this was caught in the sound room upstairs. Someone was listening to the news, and it was said so faintly that almost nobody could hear it, but it was brought to that man's attention that, hey, they just signed a 7-year peace agreement. And they called me and told me that they had recorded it. So we got it on tape and played it for everyone. We got it in it came out later too, in the 7-year peace plan. Well, see, I'd written about that peace plan in the 70s in the book called The Mark of the Beast. Then it was signed September the 13th, 1993. That's the same peace plan now that they're given 9 months to get back in order, because it's split up into 3 time periods here. So he says, this is going to be hidden now. It's going to be sealed until this time, and the dividing of times, which we know this is the generation, as Yeshua said, for this time and dividing of time, or a 7-year peace agreement would be signed. And then it would stop at a certain time, then it would start again, and be finished then when the nuclear war was actually turned loose. And that's what we're waiting on now. Well, they start this up. The Oslo Accord is the last thing, and then they will say they have peace through peace, as 2 Thessalonians brings out. But notice how clear this is. He will think to change times and laws, and they will be given into his hand. This will be allowed, see? You see that? Look at that. This is a marvelous prophecy here. Really marvelous. They will be given into his hands. That is, taking away the laws, changing the laws, doing away with it, killing off of the saints. This went on for years. Almost 2,000 years. Before Yahweh finally brought it back to you to have here so you could train in the laws of Yahweh, be wise, and turn many to righteousness. Righteousness is keeping the laws. Well, it's taken away until this time period. Now go back to chapter 12 here. You can be part of this work if you humble yourselves and become a part of this work and really set your mind on it. You can qualify for this position. There's a short time left, but very short time. Now, if you look at chapter 12 now, and notice Daniel says, shut up the words. Remember, chapter 7 says it'll be given into his hand until this time and the dividing of times. At that time, you see the wise, people made wise, and then turn many to righteousness. He's prophesied a work here that's going on, that would go on, that would reach the entire world, as Matthew 24:14 shows. But he says, Daniel 12, verse 4, you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Time of the end. Many will run to and fro. That's rush. It actually means rush, to and fro, like we see today. Rush to and fro, and knowledge will be increased in that time period when we will turn many to righteousness. Isn't that beautiful? Fight against the saints, wear out the saints. Praise Yahweh. They attack mentally to cause to fall away from the following the inspired prophets. And as we see in Jeremiah, if you turn back, keep this in mind right here, and go back to Jeremiah 23. Now, we see exactly what's taking place in the Vatican. We see it here. We see in Jeremiah, (23) and verse 1, he says, woe to the pastors who destroy and scatter my sheep. Therefore, this is what Yahweh says, Father of Israel says, against the pastors who feed my people. You have scattered my flock and driven them away, and have not visited them. Behold, I am going to visit and attend to you for the evil of your doings, says Yahweh. Now, in verse 5, he shows how he's going to do this. He says, behold, and you'd have to know the rest of the prophecies now, but I got it in all of this in sermons and in books and writing. You have no excuse. Verse 5, he says, behold, the day comes, says Yahweh, that I will raise up to David a righteous branch. A righteous branch. Now, Yeshua is not the branch. Yeshua is the vine. And a king will reign and succeed and will execute judgment and justice in the earth. That's what we're doing right now. Praise Yahweh. In his day, Yahweh will be saved. Yes, now has come salvation. Only now has come salvation. People qualified, people were given authority to become the sons of Yahweh. They actually lived a life that actually gave them authority to become the sons of Yahweh. But they haven't yet. Only one has made it. That is Yeshua. The others won't make it until you make it to them. That's part of your job in resurrecting the dead. Those people are going to have to be caught up to what you are here today, and you'll make it possible for them. And that because they already have the authority to become the sons of Yahweh, they just got to be trained and brought up to date. Well, he says, in his day, Yahweh will be saved. Yes, there'll be salvation offered. Right now, it's being offered. And Israel will dwell safely, and this is the name, Yahweh our righteousness. Therefore, behold, the day comes, says Yahweh, that they will no longer say, as surely as Yahweh lives, who brought up. Now that brought up, I've went to extremes to show you what that means with Moshe. And if you forget these things that I bring you, it's your fault, not mine. You really should keep studying them over and over. But brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt, that was in Moshe's day, and the word brought up was actually including Moshe, as it speaks of the last day's witness who was brought up by a woman in the ends of the earth to actually teach Yahweh's way today, so you could train and be wise and bring forth fruit to the house, to Yahweh. And you can't make it without the branch. You can't make it without the vine. Yeshua plainly said that. If you don't believe it, you're a fool and you'll burn in hell, not ever believing the word of Yahweh. But they will say, as surely as Yahweh lives, who brought up and led the seed of the house of Israel, that is the seed that was chosen, Abraham's seed. You got to tie this in with what Yeshua said to know what he's talking about. The seed of Abraham. And you are a seed of Abraham if you believe into the branch, believe into the work, not come against it, not fight against it, but believe into. Whatever you're assigned to do, do it with all your might, Yahweh says. That is the law. Someone said, it's not a sin to eat of that fruit. Remember that? Remember that saying? Actually, sodomy is not a sin. Well, that's what they said. Sodomy is not a sin. But he didn't go on to tell you the act of sodomy is a sin. Bestiality, that's simply a word, but you commit it, and it becomes. Keep in mind the one thing. Abel was a righteous priest. Cain hated Abel because he taught righteousness. He taught there's only one way, and this is it. It's got to be this way. Well, Cain solved his problem, he thought, by killing Abel. And of course, this started continual war, trying to force people. Out of the protected place and from the countries where I had driven them, and they will dwell in their own land. And that land, of course, is right here. Remember, his work, that work will never go back to that other place. His work will stay right here, as is shown in Scripture. This Jeremiah here, he's saying here in Jeremiah, he says, first off, the pastors who turned them away. Well, we know that these pastors were condemned. In fact, Jeremiah 23, if you'll look, but he's creating another work here to restore righteousness. Remember Daniel's prophecy. The wise are going to turn many to righteousness. Now, if you go over to verse 14 in this same chapter now, and still continuing this subject, then we see what is taking place today. I have also seen in the prophets of Jerusalem. These were not the prophets of Yahweh. The prophets of Yahweh were in Galilee. Remember, John was one of those prophets. Yochanan was one of those prophets, went up to Jerusalem, said, "You're not living by the laws of Yahweh," and they cut off his head. Well, this is how fast Satan works. You know, she could create a problem in a hurry and get someone's head cut off. I have also seen in the prophets of Jerusalem horrible thing. They commit adultery. They walk in lies. This is not the house of Yahweh in these days. In fact, we started years ago to get the adultery and fornication out of the house of Yahweh. And I think we've succeeded. If there's any I don't know about it, if I find out about it, you can be sure that I and the priest of Yahweh are going to come down hard and heavy on it. They also strengthen the hands of evildoers so that no one turns from his wickedness. All of them are like Sodom and Gomorrah. Therefore, this is what Yahweh of hosts says concerning these prophets. Behold, I will feed them with wormwood and make them drink the water of gall, for from the prophets of Jerusalem profaneness. Remember, he just mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, this same profaneness has gone out to all the land. The word land there means whole earth, wherever there is activity. It's a whole world, this from these prophets of Jerusalem. But in the last days, he's going to establish a house, a branch from the vine that's hooked to the rock, Yahweh. And from that is going to come forth the golden oil to the people to make them wise of great understanding so they can turn many to righteousness. If you don't turn there, we don't have time. Revelations 12:9, the whole world is deceived. Revelations 9:21, we see they won't repent. Well, we better turn to that one because there's some things here I want to show you. The reason that we establish certain laws is to guide our people away from sin. And of course, we don't want sin to get started in the house of Yahweh again. So we guard it very, very closely. Praise Yahweh. Here we see that this great tribulation is going to come. We see the quartet here started with chapter 6 to explain what's going on right now with the Vatican and, of course, the United States, Great Britain, and Israel. We see the Euphrates River here, verse 14. This is in chapter 9 of Revelation. We see the three colors of the nuclear bomb that's going to be used here. By these three, 1/3 of man will be killed by this nuclear war that we're looking for that could break loose at any moment now. We see that all in this chapter here. But notice, those who are left, the rest of the men who were not killed by these plagues still did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not follow gods. If you remember, Satan says, partake of this sin, and you will be like the gods. Well, of course, this is what the world is today. They're following the gods, demons. Their whole life is bent on collecting of silver and gold and brass and stone and so forth. But neither did they repent of their murders. And there's thousands of ways to murder today. There's a war that kills the biggest portion. And then you have, after the wars, you have the abortions, you have the drugs that is also shown here in pharmaceuticals, sorceries, pharmaceuticals. Then you have the fornication and the theft. Fornication and theft. Fornication, if you just notice what Yahshua said and remember it closely, it starts with lust. And you've lusted after her already in your heart. And of course, we say, where are the veils? This will help. This will at least clue the person in, hey, I'm trying to look at something that I shouldn't. Where are the veils? Of course, Satan steps up and says, well, Yahshua said it best. Turn over to Mark. Mark 4. I'll get through here quickly, or at least find a quitting place. Mark 4, and look at verse 13. Now, here's how it works. And here's why we want you to guard all times. Be on guard of yourself. Don't let this occur. Remember Joseph and how strong he was. All you boys, listen to me closely. Joseph was sent down into Egypt. The queen, he was put at work with the queen, like you see today in the workplaces. Blue Cross Blue Shield, which stacks men and women together. They commit fornication, they commit adultery, they divorce husbands and wives, they remarry, they commit fornication, they commit adultery, they get another divorce, they get another marriage, and this is the sickness that's going on in the world today. Well, we said, the House of Yahweh said, the priests said, and they all agreed, we're going to stop this sin in the House of Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Well, of course, we said these are things that we need to do. One thing, we need to quit drinking. We need to quit drinking alcohol. Let's be like the Savior, we said. Because a lot of people were losing it when they were drinking, that they got to where their liver was so contaminated that one beer would make them as drunk as a case. And I've seen that occur before death occurs. The liver can't take it, so it collapses and becomes diseased, and it kills them. Well, here in Mark now, Yahshua said, and if you'll look at verse 13, he said, then he said to them, do you not understand this parable? But how then will you understand any parable? The sower sows. That's what we're doing right now. I'm sowing this seed to you. The sower sows the word. What was the word? Let's go ahead and do it. Hold your place right there and turn over to 1 Kings 13. 1 Kings 13. Found on page 289, if it'll make it any faster. 289. 1 Kings 13. Now remember the sower. Yahshua said that sower was Yahweh, of course. But it was Abel. Abel was the first sower of Yahweh. Well, here in 13, in 1 Kings 13, we see Behold, a man of Yahweh came from Yada by the word of Yahweh to Bethel. Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make an offering. He cried out against the altar by the word of Yahweh, and he said, Altar, altar, this is what Yahweh says. Behold, a son will be born to the house of David, Yeshua by name, and upon you he will sacrifice. He's talking to the altar. Yeshua is going to be born, a man named Yeshua. Now, this is a beautiful prophecy right here. It's a marvelous prophecy. This prophecy wasn't fulfilled for 142 years after this. Both tribes, Judah and Israel, they were all alerted to this. They were guarding it. They were looking for it. There's no way this could take place. They'd be on guard and they'd stop this man instantly, but yet 142 years later, it took place. This man was born by that name, and he did exactly what Yahweh said that he would do. Now, if you're wise, you won't act like the Christians and start arguing about, well, just any man could be chosen. This step's totally out of line with what the House of Yahweh teaches. No. You know, I had arguments about this, I think, when I was in college. But I said, no, this man was sent. This man was sent here. He was sent by Eliah. Eliah was in that time period. He had a school of the prophets, remember? And he sent the man there to tell this thing to this king. But he says, speak to this altar and say, this is what's going to take place. A man is going to be born by the name of Josiah. The King James Version says Josiah by name. And upon this altar, he will sacrifice the priest of the high places. That is, all the Christian leaders that was teaching Halloween, following the gods, he's going to sacrifice all of these on this altar. And he did. Beautiful, beautiful prophecy. Priest on the high places, who burn incense on you, and men's bones shall be burned on you. And he gave the sign the same day, saying, this is the sign of Yahweh has given, sign that Yahweh has given. The altar will be split apart, and the ashes on it will be poured out. Now this prophet was sent, and of course Yeshua said, if you go back now to his writings, he says the sower was sent. And that's what I am today. That's what the priest of the house of Yahweh, because I'm sending them. I'm sending the priests. I'm sending teachers right now. Yahweh will raise up a branch. He'll raise up a vine. It will sit at Yahweh's right hand, who will behold the branch and see to it that the branch does exactly what prophecy shows he's going to do. That's what's taking place. Well, you're back at Mark now, the 4th chapter, verse 13. He said to them, do not you understand? Then verse 14, the sower sows the word of Yahweh. Those, by the way, are those of whom the word, the law and the prophets are sown. But when they are heard, notice what takes place there. Same thing that took place in Genesis. Yahweh said, don't be partaking of sin. And here comes the woman, the mate that you gave me. And says, look how much fun this is. Well, Yahweh didn't say that. Did he say Yahweh said that? Well, that's not true. Satan inspires people to do things. He inspired Eve to go ahead and do this sin and take it to Adam. Well, verse 15, if you'll look at it closely, Satan immediately comes to take away the word that was sown in their hearts. I don't have time to cover it, but I know you probably remember there was a man who said to his sons, "Don't drink wine. Don't drink any more wine." And of course, Satan comes along and says, "Well, there ain't no law that says that, you know." Well, the sower said it. He sure did. And the sower saw the danger in it. And you know, as a result of that, his sons drank no more wine. They wouldn't drink any wine. And as a result of that obedience, in spite of Satan saying, "There's no law there." I remember one time we was getting ready for the greatest feast, and somebody started the rumor there wasn't such a word as Seder in the Scripture. I said, they got to be talking like a man that fell up a tree and hit his head on the top limb. You know, well, here's stupidity acting on stupidity, and of course it brings forth doubt to the house. And I don't know if anyone left. I hope they didn't, you know. I hope they wouldn't throw away their salvation because somebody whispers in their ear some stupid thing like this and tries to get them to not obey the words of the sower. Your whole life is spent on one thing. You can throw it away if you want to, but unless you believe into the one sent, you're not going to make it. That's a fact. It's a simple thing to do. And Yahweh says, He says of me, He says He's going to be of quick understanding. He's going to bring forth righteousness and salvation. Salvation, never given before this time, and we're getting ready to give salvation even to those who have died before us, who have authority, but they haven't received it. But they will receive it from you. Those who are wise will turn many to righteousness. They will be sent. They won't go out on their own. You go out on your own, you're lost. You forget about it. Then you'll be slipping back into Satan's hands. And you'll think you're wise, and Yahweh will give you over to foolishness. And of course, you'll start sinning again. I was told the other day that somebody who stayed in the House of Yahweh 29 years and pretended to be righteous, they walk into a pizza place and order pizza that was made with pork. Well, this, of course, they put on a lie, you know. This was pretense. For 29 years, they pretended. They pretended, and now they're back into the jaws of Satan again. They threw it away. Don't you throw it away, brethren. Be like these boys where the father said, "Don't do this, don't do this." Be like that. Submit, humbly submit like this little child. Obey. Obedience is what is going to get you into the kingdom. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you.